The first explosion lit up the morning sky like a second sun. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the metal railing of Unity 7's observation deck and watched his world burn below. New Terra, humanity's pride, and the most beautiful colony in the Outer Rim was dying. The alien ships came down like falling stars, but these stars brought death instead of wishes. Jake had seen many battles in his 20 years of service, but nothing like this. The Zephyrian ships moved through space like dancers, graceful and deadly. Their hulls gleamed like black glass, and when they fired their weapons, the beams cut through human defenses like hot knives through butter. "Captain, we're losing contact with Ground Station 5, reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from the communication panel. Her voice stayed steady, but Jake could see her hands shaking as she worked. "The Marines at Haven Ridge are requesting immediate backup." Jake turned from the window and looked at the tactical display. Red dots marked enemy positions, and there were too many to count. Blue dots showed human forces, and they were disappearing one by one. In 3 hours of fighting, humanity had lost more ships than in the last 10 years of colonial wars combined. "Send everything we have," Jake ordered. "Pull back the patrol ships from the outer sectors." "Sir, that will leave the civilian transports unprotected," Amy said. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Every decision now meant choosing who would live and who would die. "Do it. We need to buy time for the evacuation." On the planet below, Amy could see the capital city of Haven Ridge burning. The Zephyrians had landed their ground forces 3 hours ago, and the human defenders were falling back on all fronts. The aliens stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and bodies covered in what looked like living crystal. Their weapons fired bolts of pure energy that could melt through tank armor. The worst part was how fast they moved. Human soldiers had trained to fight other humans, rebels and pirates, who used similar weapons and tactics. But the Zephyrians fought like nothing humans had ever seen. They could leap 50 feet in a single bound and run faster than military vehicles. Their crystal skin turned aside most human weapons, and when they did get hurt, they healed quickly. Jake watched on his screens as Marine Captain Ron Blake led a desperate defense of the main evacuation point. The captain had served in the Mars Rebellion and the asteroid mining wars. He was the kind of soldier who never gave up, never retreated. But even Blake's experience meant nothing against enemies who seemed to come from a nightmare. "Captain Morrison," came Blake's voice over the radio, filled with static and the sound of weapons fire. "We can't hold them much longer. These things, they're not like anything we've fought before. Our plasma rifles barely scratch them, and they're tearing through our positions like we're not even here." "Hold your ground, Blake," Jake replied. "Help is coming." But Jake knew it was a lie. The help he was sending would not be enough. Nothing they had would be enough. The human fleet, once the pride of the Colonial Defense Force, was being destroyed piece by piece. Ships that had taken years to build were turned into scrap metal in minutes. Amy's fingers flew over her controls as she tried to coordinate the evacuation. Transport ships loaded with civilians were racing for the jump points, trying to escape before the Zephyrian fleet could stop them. Some made it, others did not. Amy watched the signals disappear from her screen and tried not to think about the families aboard those ships. "Captain," called out Engineer Pete Rogers from his station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Zephyrian command ship. I think they're preparing for orbital bombardment." Jake felt his heart sink. If the aliens started bombing from space, every human on the planet would die. The evacuation ships could never get everyone off in time. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 30 minutes," Pete replied. "Once they start, there won't be anywhere to hide." Jake made his decision. "All ships, this is Unity 7. We're going to ram the command ship. Maybe we can damage their bombardment systems." "Sir, that's suicide," Amy said quietly. Yes, it is. Jake agreed. But it might save the people on those transport ships. As Unity 7 turned toward the massive alien vessel, Jake walked to his private cabin. Something had been bothering him since the attack began. The Zephyrians fought with incredible skill and technology, but they also seemed to know exactly where to hit human forces. It was as if they had studied humanity for years. In his cabin, Jake opened his personal computer and began searching through the station's data archives. Most of the files were routine military reports and supply lists, but buried deep in the old data was something strange. A file marked Project Ancient Warrior with a security level Jake had never seen before. The file was encrypted, but Jake had learned a few tricks in his years of service. As the ship shook under enemy fire, he worked to break the code. What he found inside made his blood run cold. The file contained references to an ancient human civilization, one that had fought wars among the stars, long before modern humans ever left Earth. There were mentions of warriors with incredible powers and weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Most shocking of all, there were genetic markers, codes that could identify descendants of these ancient fighters. Unity 7's hull began to glow as the Zephyrian command ship's weapons locked onto them. Jake knew he had only seconds left. With his last breath, he transmitted the file to Earth, hoping someone would understand its importance. The explosion lit up space like a new star, and Unity 7 was gone. But Jake's final message raced through space toward Earth, carrying with it humanity's last hope. Deep in hidden places, ancient secrets waited to be discovered. The war was not over. It had only just begun. 3 months had passed since New Terra burned, and Earth itself was under siege. Dr. Helen Gray stood at the entrance to the abandoned military tunnel, her breath making small clouds in the cold mountain air. The coordinates from Captain Morrison's final message had led her here, to the Rocky Mountains, where layers of human history lay buried beneath tons of rock and concrete. "This is crazy, Doc," said Sergeant Ron Blake, adjusting his heavy pack. The veteran soldier had escaped from New Terra on one of the last transport ships, and the memories of that day still haunted his eyes. "We should be up there fighting, not down here chasing ghost stories." Helen checked her equipment one more time. "Jake Morrison died getting us this information, Ron. The least we can do is see what he thought was so important." The tunnel entrance looked like dozens of others, scattered throughout the mountain. During the old wars of the 21st century, humans had dug deep into the earth, building bunkers and hiding places. Most had been forgotten when humanity reached for the stars, but the mountain remembered everything. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they walked deeper underground. The first level held the remains of an old missile command center. Dust covered everything, and their footsteps echoed in the empty halls. But the coordinates pointed deeper, much deeper than any military installation had a right to go. "How far down does this thing go?" asked Dr. Pete Rogers, their engineer. He had volunteered for the mission after losing his entire family in the Zephyrian attack on Mars Colony. Like many survivors, he needed something to focus on besides grief. Helen consulted her scanner. "According to Morrison's data, we need to go down another 5 levels. There should be a hidden passage behind the old nuclear storage area." They found the passage exactly where the coordinates said it would be. The wall looked solid, but when Helen pressed the right sequence of numbers into a hidden keypad, it slid open with a soft hiss. The air that rushed out smelled old, older than anything they had encountered so far. "That's impossible," Pete whispered, staring at his instruments. "This passage is carved from solid rock, but my scanner says it's over 10,000 years old. Humans didn't have that kind of technology back then." The passage led down, always down, through layers of earth that told the story of the planet's history. But as they descended, Helen began to notice something strange. The walls were too smooth, too perfect. No human tool from ancient times could have created such precise cuts in solid granite dot. After an hour of walking, they reached a massive chamber that took their breath away. The space was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, and the walls pulsed with a soft blue light that seemed to come from within the stone itself. In the center of the chamber stood a crystal formation, unlike anything they had ever seen. My God, Helen breathed, pulling out her recording equipment. This changes everything we know about human history. The crystal was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It stood 30 feet tall and was perfectly shaped, as if someone had grown it rather than carved it. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing and fading in patterns that almost seemed like a heartbeat. Ron kept his weapon ready as they approached the crystal. His soldier instincts told him that something this unusual could be dangerous. "Doc, maybe we should call this in before we get too close." But Helen was already examining the symbols with her scanner. "These aren't random marks, Ron. They're a language, but not like any human language I've ever seen. The patterns are too complex, too advanced." As she worked, holographic images began to appear around the crystal. The air filled with pictures that moved like movies, showing scenes that made no sense. They saw humans, but not humans as they knew them. These people wore armor that seemed to be made of light itself, and they carried weapons that bent the very air around them. "Are we looking at some kind of movie?" Pete asked, reaching out to touch one of the images. His hand passed right through it. The holographic scenes showed battles fought among the stars, with human warriors facing creatures that looked like living shadows. The humans in the images moved with incredible speed and strength, leaping between spaceships and fighting with powers that seemed almost magical. Helen's scanner beeped rapidly as it analyzed the data. "These aren't movies, Pete. They're historical records. And according to my readings, they're over 12,000 years old." More images appeared, showing a great war that raged across the galaxy. The shadow creatures consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The human warriors fought bravely, but they were losing. Then came images of a great retreat, with the surviving humans hiding their weapons and going into deep sleep in hidden places like this chamber. "The firstborn," Helen read from the symbols her scanner had translated. "That's what they called themselves. They were our ancestors, but they had technology we can't even imagine today." Ron stared at the images of ancient human warriors. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? Why did they hide? The holographic records provided the answer. The firstborn had made a terrible discovery during their war with the shadow creatures. Their enemy grew stronger with each battle, feeding on conflict and destruction. The only way to stop them was to disappear, to let the galaxy think humanity was extinct. But the firstborn had been clever. Before going into hiding, they had scattered their genetic code among the human population. Someday, when humanity faced extinction again, their descendants would be able to awaken the ancient powers and continue the fight. Helen's hands shook as she realized what they had found. "Ron, Pete, we're not looking at ancient history. We're looking at a weapon. The most powerful weapon humanity has ever possessed." The crystal pulsed brighter, responding to their presence. More symbols appeared, showing genetic patterns and activation sequences. Helen began to understand that specific humans carried the right genetic markers to use firstborn technology. These people could be awakened, transformed into warriors with the power to fight back against any enemy. "Doc," Ron said quietly, "are you saying that some of us carry this ancient warrior blood?" Helen nodded, her scanner beeping as it detected something in the air around them. "Not just some of us, Ron. According to these readings, you and Pete both carry strong genetic markers." The firstborn chose their hiding places carefully. They knew their descendants would eventually find them. As if responding to her words, the chamber filled with a low humming sound. Other crystals, hidden in the walls, began to glow. The ancient technology was waking up after thousands of years of sleep. Pete checked his instruments again. Helen, we're getting massive energy readings from all over this chamber. Whatever this place is, it's starting to power up. Helen knew they had to get this information back to Earth Command immediately. Jake Morrison had died to get them these coordinates, and now she understood why. The war with the Zephyrians wasn't over. It was about to begin for real, with weapons and warriors that had been sleeping in the darkness for thousands of years as they prepared to leave the chamber. Helen took one last look at the holographic warriors. Soon, she hoped, their descendants would stand among the stars again, ready to fight for humanity's survival. The firstborn had risen once before to defend the galaxy. Now it was time for them to rise again. 2 weeks after the discovery in the mountain, Helen Gray stood in a secret military facility deep in the Nevada desert. Around her, 12 people sat in medical chairs connected to machines that hummed with energy from the ancient crystals. These were the chosen ones, humans whose blood carried the strongest genetic markers of the firstborn, Marcus. Webb gripped the arms of his chair as waves of pain shot through his body. The former Special Forces soldier had lost his entire unit on Mars, and now strange memories that were not his own flooded his mind. He saw battles fought in space, weapons that could crack planets, and warriors who moved like lightning between the stars. The pain is normal, Dr. Kate Lewis said from the chair next to him. The quantum physicist had volunteered for the process. After her research station was destroyed in the first wave of Zephyrian attacks, her scientific mind tried to understand what was happening to them. But the changes went beyond anything human science could explain. In another chair, Marine veteran Tony Harris clenched his teeth as his muscles grew stronger and denser. His bones were changing too, becoming harder than steel, but somehow lighter than before. The transformation felt like being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. Engineer Sophie Turner watched the readings on her medical monitors with fascination and terror. Her body was adapting to interface with technology that was older than human civilization. She could feel new pathways forming in her brain, connections that would let her control machines with her thoughts alone. Helen monitored the process from the control room, watching as each candidate's body absorbed the genetic modifications. Not everyone could handle the change. 3 people had already been removed from the program when their bodies rejected the ancient DNA. The process was dangerous, but it was humanity's only hope. "How are they doing, Doc?" asked General Carl Hayes, the military officer in charge of the project. The general had gray hair and tired eyes, having watched humanity lose battle after battle against the Zephyrians. "Better than expected," Helen replied, checking her instruments. "Marcus and Kate are showing the strongest responses. Their bodies are adapting to the firstborn genetics faster than the others. The transformation took 3 days. During that time, the candidates experienced visions of the ancient war between the firstborn and the shadow creatures. They saw civilizations that spanned entire galaxies, weapons that could reshape reality, and warriors who fought for the survival of all organic life. Marcus was the first to complete the change. When he opened his eyes, they glowed with a soft blue light that matched the ancient crystals. His body felt different, stronger and faster than any human had a right to be. But more than that, he could sense the presence of the firstborn technology. In the facility, "How do you feel?" Helen asked, running her scanner over him. "Different," Marcus said, his voice deeper than before. "I can feel things I never felt before. The machines in this room, the energy flowing through the walls. It's like I can see through them." Kate sat up in her chair, her own eyes now glowing with the same blue light. "The equations are so clear now," she whispered. I can see how space and time connect, how the ancient technology works. It's not just advanced science, it's something else entirely. One by one, the other candidates completed their transformation. Tony's reflexes became so fast he could catch bullets with his bare hands. Sophie could interface with any machine, just by touching it, understanding its function instantly. Each person developed abilities that would have seemed impossible before, but the real test came when Helen brought them to the equipment room. Along the walls hung suits of armor that had been created using firstborn technology. The armor looked like it was made from living crystal, flowing and changing shape as they watched. "These are your weapons," Helen explained. "The armor will enhance your natural abilities and protect you from anything the Zephyrians can throw." "At you." Marcus approached one of the suits and reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact, the armor flowed over his body like liquid metal. It fit perfectly, responding to his thoughts and movements. Through the armor, he could feel his strength increase. Kate put on her own suit, gasped as information flooded her mind. The armor contained databases of knowledge from the firstborn civilization, including the secrets of their most powerful weapons. She understood now why the ancient warriors had been so feared across the galaxy. The real test came sooner than anyone expected. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility as radar detected incoming Zephyrian ships. A strike force had found the secret base and was moving in to destroy it. "Looks like we get to test these suits sooner than planned," Tony said, his armor gleaming as weapons emerged from its surface. Helen watched from the control room as the 12 warriors prepared for battle. Through the facility's cameras, she could see Zephyrian dropships landing outside. The alien soldiers poured out, their crystal armor glinting in the desert sun. Marcus led his team to the surface, where they faced the Zephyrian assault force. The aliens were bigger and stronger than humans, but they had never fought opponents like these before. When Marcus moved, he became a blur of motion, striking faster than the eye could follow. Kate discovered that her armor could bend space around her, allowing her to appear and disappear like a ghost. She struck at Zephyrian warriors from impossible angles, her energy weapons cutting through their defenses like paper. Sophie interfaced with a damaged Zephyrian hover tank and turned its weapons against its former allies. The aliens watched in shock as their own technology was used against them with deadly precision. The battle lasted only minutes. When it was over, the Zephyrian strike force had been completely destroyed. The 12 warriors stood among the wreckage, their armor glowing with power that had been sleeping for thousands of years. "My God," General Hayes whispered from the control room. "They're actually doing it. They're fighting back." But Marcus felt the weight of what they had become. Through his armor, he could sense other Zephyrian forces moving toward Earth. Enemy had detected the energy signatures from the ancient technology and knew that humanity had found something dangerous. "This is just the beginning," he told his team. "The real war is about to start." Helen watched her warriors and knew that humanity's fate now rested in their hands. The firstborn had awakened once again, and this time they would not hide in the shadows. The ancient fighters had risen, and they were ready to take back the stars. 6 months after the first awakening, the stealth ship Defiance moved through space like a ghost. Captain Pete Rogers sat in the pilot's chair, his hands resting on controls that responded to his thoughts rather than his touch. The ship itself was built using firstborn technology, able to fold space around itself and travel through dimensions that normal ships could never reach. "Target acquired," reported Marcus Webb from the tactical station. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the Zephyrian fleet holding position around Titan, one of humanity's most important mining colonies. Intelligence reports said the aliens were using human prisoners as slave workers, forcing them to dig for resources needed to fuel their war machine. Dr. Kate Lewis studied the energy readings from her science station. 12 ships in the main fleet, plus orbital defense platforms. They've turned our own mining equipment into weapons against us. Tony Harris checked his assault ear one more time. How many prisoners are we looking at? Best estimate is around 3,000 civilians, Marcus replied. Men, women, and children from the mining families. They've been working in the deep tunnels for months. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Defiance would emerge from fold space directly inside the Zephyrian formation, catching them by surprise. The 12 warriors would then assault the main command ship while the Defiance provided cover fire. It was the kind of mission that would have been impossible before the awakening. 30 seconds to emergence, Pete announced. The ship vibrated. As it prepared to tear through the fabric of space itself, Marcus stood with his team in the launch bay, their crystal armor gleaming under the ship's lights. Each warrior carried weapons that could reshape matter at the atomic level, but they also felt the weight of responsibility. These were the first human prisoners they would attempt to rescue since the war began. Remember, Marcus told his team, we're not just fighting for revenge anymore. Those people down there are counting on us to bring them home. The Defiance burst from fold space like a silver arrow, appearing in the middle of the Zephyrian fleet. Without warning, alarm signals screamed through the alien ships as they tried to understand how a human vessel had penetrated their defenses. The warriors launched themselves into space, their armor allowing them to survive in the vacuum. Sophie. Turner moved toward the nearest Zephyrian destroyer, her hands glowing with energy as she prepared to interface with its systems. When she touched the ship's hull, her consciousness flowed into its computers, like water. The alien crew watched in horror as their own ship turned against them. Sophie seized control of the weapon systems and began firing on the other Zephyrian vessels. The aliens had never encountered an enemy who could turn their technology against them so completely. Marcus and Kate targeted the command ship, a massive vessel that towered over the others like a metal mountain. As they approached, defensive weapons opened fire, but the energy beams passed through them harmlessly. Their armor bent light and energy around them, making them nearly impossible to hit. Inside the command ship, Zephyrian officers struggled to understand what was happening. Their sensors showed impossible readings, humans moving through space without ships, weapons that ignored their strongest shields, and worst of all, their own technology being used against them. The ship's commander, a veteran warrior named HFY War, studied the tactical displays with growing fear. In his species' ancient records, there were stories of a race called the Firstborn, beings who had once ruled the galaxy with technology beyond imagination. But those were just legends, myths told to children. They could not be real. Marcus crashed through the command ship's hull like a meteor, his armor protecting him from the explosive decompression. Zephyrian soldiers tried to stop him, but their weapons were useless against Firstborn technology. He moved through the ship's corridors like a force of nature, unstoppable and terrible. When he reached the bridge, HFY was waiting for him. The alien commander stood nearly 9 feet tall, his crystal armor decorated with the marks of 100 battles. But when he saw Marcus, fear filled his 4 eyes. "You are Firstborn," HFY said in broken human language. "We thought you were extinct." Marcus stopped, surprised that the alien could speak his language. "You know about the Firstborn?" "Our legends speak of them," HFY replied. "The Star Killers, the World Breakers. They fought the Void Devourers in the ancient times and vanished from the galaxy." "Void Devourers?" Marcus asked, lowering his weapon slightly. HFY's armor began to show images, holographic displays that told a story Marcus had never heard. The images showed the Zephyrian homeworld, a beautiful planet covered in crystal cities. Then came darkness. creatures made of pure emptiness that consumed everything they touched. They came to our world 5 cycles ago, HFY explained. They ate our sun, our planets, our people. We are all that remains of a civilization that once numbered in the billions. We came to your space not as conquerors, but as refugees seeking new homes. Marcus felt his anger cooling as he watched the images. The Zephyrians were not evil invaders, but desperate survivors, just like humanity. But then other images appeared, human prisoners being experimented on, children being used as test subjects. That does not excuse what you have done to my people, Marcus said, his weapon powering up again. We needed to understand, HFY said desperately. Your species carries the genetic markers of the firstborn. We thought if we could unlock those secrets, we could fight back against the Void Devourers. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm that filled the ship. Kate's voice came through Marcus's communication system, filled with urgency. Marcus, we've got bigger problems. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Something big is coming. Marcus looked at HFY, seeing genuine terror in the alien's eyes. The Void Devourers? They followed us, HFY whispered. They always follow. They will consume this entire system, just as they consumed ours. Through the ship's windows, Marcus could see space itself beginning to bend and twist. Darkness spread between the stars, not the absence of light, but something worse, the absence of everything. The Void Devourers had found them. Marcus made a decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of destroying the Zephyrian commander, he extended his hand. If we're going to survive this, we need to work together, he said. Your people and mine, fighting side by side. HFY looked at the offered hand for a long moment, and reached out with one of his 4 arms. The firstborn return in our darkest hour. Perhaps there is hope after all. As the 2 former enemies shook hands, space around them continued to darken. The real war was about to begin, and this time humanity would not fight alone. The ancient warriors had risen again, and they were about to face the same enemy their predecessors had battled thousands of years ago. But now they had allies, and together they might stand a chance against the darkness that devoured worlds. The darkness between the stars grew larger with each passing hour. Earth's orbital defense stations watched helplessly as space itself seemed to dissolve at the edges of the solar system. The Void Devourers had arrived, and they brought with them a hunger that could consume entire worlds. Admiral Lisa Stone stood in the command center of the joint, human Zephyrian fleet, watching the tactical displays with growing dread. In just 2 days, the alliance between former enemies had grown into a fighting force of over 200 ships. But against the Void Devourers, even that might not be enough. How many of them are there? Asked Commander HFY, his crystal armor reflecting the red warning lights of the command center. Our sensors can't get accurate readings, replied Dr. Kate Lewis from her station. They seem to exist partially outside normal space. Best estimate is at least 50 entities, each one the size of a small moon. Marcus Webb studied the enemy formations through the ship's advanced sensors. The Void Devourers looked like living holes in reality, dark shapes that bent light around them. Where they moved, stars went out forever. Planets simply ceased to exist, leaving behind not even dust or debris. Helen, are you reading this? Marcus spoke into his communication device. Back on Earth, Dr. Helen Gray worked frantically in the mountain facility. She had discovered something in the deepest archives of the firstborn, information that might give them a chance. But the price would be terrible. Marcus, I've found records of the last war between the firstborn and these creatures. Helen's voice crackled through the communication system. The firstborn won, but they had to sacrifice their entire civilization to do it. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "They created a weapon called the Quantum Cascade. It could seal the dimensional passages the Void Devourers used to travel between galaxies. But using it required the combined life force of every firstborn warrior. They saved the galaxy by giving their lives." Marcus looked around the bridge at his fellow warriors. Kate, Tony, Sophie, and the others had become more than soldiers. They were family. The thought of losing them all filled him with cold dread. "There has to be another way," he said. "There might be," Helen replied. "The weapon was designed for pure firstborn genetics. But you're hybrids, part ancient warrior and part modern human. Your human side might be able to survive what would kill a full firstborn." Through the ship's windows, Marcus could see the first Void Devourer approaching Earth's outer defense ring. The massive creature moved slowly, but with unstoppable purpose. When it reached the moon, the satellite simply vanished, as if it had never existed at all. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone," came the announcement over the fleet communication system. "We're moving to intercept. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth or the Zephyrian colonies. We're fighting for the right of all organic life to exist in this universe." The combined fleet moved toward the approaching darkness. Human ships flew alongside Zephyrian vessels, their weapons powered by technology that spanned thousands of years. The first battle began when long-range cannons opened fire on the nearest Void Devourer. The energy beams struck the creature and simply disappeared, absorbed into its dark mass. The entity didn't even slow down. Instead, it released a wave of nothingness that consumed 3 Zephyrian destroyers instantly. The ships didn't explode or break apart. They just stopped existing. "Conventional weapons are useless," reported Tony Harris from his fighter craft. "These things eat energy like it's food." Sophie Turner had a different idea. Instead of firing at the creatures directly, she began interfacing with the space around them. Using firstborn technology, she tried to reinforce reality itself, making it harder for the Void Devourers to consume matter. Her efforts slowed one of the smaller entities, but the strain was enormous. Through her armor's communication system, she could hear her heartbeat becoming irregular. The power required to fight these creatures was beyond what any single warrior could handle. "Sophie, pull back," Marcus ordered. "You're pushing too hard." "No," Sophie replied, her voice strained but determined. "I can feel how they work now. They're not just destroying matter. They're unmaking the fundamental forces that hold reality together. But if we can strengthen those forces..." She pushed harder, pouring more of her life energy into the quantum fields around the Void Devourer. The creature slowed further, then actually began to retreat from the reinforced space. But the effort was killing her. Kate Lewis suddenly understood what needed to be done. "Sophie's right, but she can't do it alone. We need to link our power together, just like the original Firstborn did." One by one, the 12 warriors joined their consciousness through their armor's communication network. Marcus felt his teammates' minds connecting with his own, their combined will focused on a single purpose. Together, they began to weave a web of reinforced reality around the approaching Void Devourers. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dark entities slowed their advance, then began to retreat toward the edge of the solar system. But maintaining the quantum barrier required constant effort from all 12 warriors. They were burning through their life force at a frightening rate. "It's working," Admiral Stone reported from the command ship. "The creatures are falling back. But you need to hold the barrier for at least 6 more hours while we evacuate the outer colonies." Marcus felt his strength fading, but held on. Around him, his fellow warriors pushed themselves beyond their limits. Tony's armor began to crack under the strain. Kate's glowing eyes dimmed as her energy reserves depleted. One by one, they were reaching the breaking point. Just when it seemed they would fail, unexpected help arrived. Throughout the fleet, human and Zephyrian crew members began to glow with the same blue light as the warriors. The firstborn genetics, dormant in so many beings, were awakening under the extreme stress of battle. Thousands of new voices joined the mental network, adding their strength to the quantum barrier. The void devourers found themselves pushed further and further back, until finally they retreated through the dimensional passages they had used to enter the galaxy. When the battle ended, Marcus collapsed in his command chair, exhausted but alive. Around him, his teammates were unconscious but breathing. The hybrid nature of their genetics had indeed saved them from the fate that befell the original firstborn. "Is it over?" Kate asked weakly as she regained consciousness. Marcus looked at the sensor displays showing clear space where the void devourers had been. "For now. But they'll be back someday, and we need to be ready." Helen's voice came through the communication. "System one final time. Marcus, we're detecting awakening signatures all across human and Zephyrian space. The battle has activated dormant genetics in millions of people. The age of ordinary humans is ending." Marcus smiled as he watched the combined fleet returning to Earth. Humans and Zephyrians flew side by side, no longer enemies, but allies in the defense of all organic life. The ancient warriors had risen again, but this time they were not alone. An entire galaxy of hybrid warriors was awakening, ready to stand guard against the darkness between the stars. The real war might be over, but the eternal watch had only just begun.